There's a scene in Man of Steel that always seemed pretty interesting for a Superman film, not because of the action or the visuals, but because of a simple choice. A young Clark Kent, scared, overwhelmed by the flood of powers awakening inside him, hides in the closet. His mother, instead of telling him to toughen up, just tells him to focus on her voice. That's it. That's the moment Zack Snyder Superman quietly told us he was going to be different. But despite the ambition, the depth, and the mythology, Snyder tried to carve into Superman's bones something that at the end of the day kept him from being fully embraced by fans or the audience, something that kept this Superman from being a good, if not a perfect, Superman. What exactly made Snyder's Superman so emotionally powerful, and what held him back from greatness? And why, for all the critics, controversy, and chaos, he might have been the Superman we needed the most? Before we can appreciate Snyder's vision, we need to rewind a bit. Superman was born in 1938, the embodiment of hope during a time of fear and global unrest. He was the symbol of idealism, truth, and the belief that power must be used selflessly. On screen, Christopher Reeve's Superman defined this image so well. His Superman smiled, he reassured, he saved cats from trees, he embodied the idea of Superman as portrayed in the comics. By the time the 2000s rolled around, the world didn't know what to do with Superman. Bryan Singer's Superman Returns tried to recapture Reeve's magic, but it just didn't hit the same. The truth was, Superman needed a new voice, one that spoke to the current state of things. That's where Zack Snyder's Superman came in. Snyder tried to recontextualize Superman for a modern audience, introducing a version that grappled with real-world complexities. If you think about it, Zack Snyder didn't just want to make a random Superman movie. He didn't just want Superman to fly. He wanted him to fall first. In Man of Steel, we meet a Clark Kent who isn't sure if the world wants him. He hides, he doubts, he hesitates. Unlike Reeves, who is this assured protector, everyone adored him from the beginning, everyone loved his Superman. But Cavill's Superman, on the other hand, is searching for meaning, for belonging, for permission to be who he is. And that's where Snyder's boldest choice lies, reframing Superman as an immigrant metaphor. Kal-El isn't just an alien because he's from Krypton, he's an outsider navigating identity. The Kryptonian heritage scenes aren't just flashy sci-fi, they are meditations on destiny versus choice, and Jonathan Kent's controversial advice telling Clark he maybe shouldn't have saved people who were kids, that wasn't necessarily cowardice, but that was a terrified father trying to protect his son from a world that feared different. And from a logical standpoint, that kind of makes sense, because a being with so much power, can he be truly good? Realistically, if a being of such caliber or power shows up, it would change the perspective of man himself, their view of science, life, and religion. But all that surrounds the fact if Superman actually existed. In Batman v Superman, the themes intensifies. Superman becomes a Rorschach test for society. Some worship him, others fear him. The world projects onto him what they want to see, and through it all, Clark is just trying to do the right thing, even if the world refuses to agree on what that is. Henry Cavill's performance, I think, really deserves praise here because he plays Superman with this undercurrent of quiet restraint, like a man holding back such a huge amount of power, trying to be gentle in a world that's anything but gentle. His Superman is not loud, he's not quippy, he's careful, and that's what makes him a compelling character, a compelling kind of Superman, although not everything makes him a perfect or an ideal Superman, but it's still good. And visually, Snyder makes Superman feel mythic, not just powerful but kind of biblical. The scene where Superman is floating above flawed victims like Christ, it may be straight out of famine, but it's deliberate. Snyder paints Superman not as a man pretending to be good, but a god who desperately is trying to be a man. And I got chewed up in the comments from my other video, The Problem with the Snyderverse Superman, because I mentioned this. But if you watch those movies, I think you will know what I'm talking about. And you will also know that I was right. However, while Snyder's Superman is rich in symbolism, some argue that the emphasis on his godlike imagery overshadowed the relatable aspect of Clark Kent. The absence of his dual identity as a mild-mannered reporter at the Daily Planet removed the layer of humanity that audiences connect with. That's why a lot of people really adore Christopher Reeve's Superman, because he found a way to blend these two personalities together and it worked so well. So with all that being said, despite the audience not appreciating Zack Snyder's Superman because he was too different, putting that aside for now, in Snyder's version of Superman, what actually worked? To me, it's the weight. Unlike so many portrayals where Superman is seen as unshakable, this one hurts. He doubts, he questions his place, and because of that, when he chooses to act, when he sacrifices, when he stands, it means something. Snyder made Superman's decisions feel earned, and there have been many other displays of this in other Superman media, but not with so much depth as Snyder did. Also, the world around Superman reacts to him like it's real. There's fear, politics, even theology. Lex Luthor, who can be very much mistaken for someone else, because I don't know what Snyder was cooking with Lex acting like totally someone else. But with that aside, this Lex doesn't just hate Superman, he philosophically opposes him. Bruce Wayne doesn't just want to beat him, he wants to dismantle the idea of him. And maybe because he wrecked his Batmobile, you don't do that. Superman is the axis upon which the world turns, and that presence really shows in all the movies. Snyder didn't shy away from the complexity. He embraced it. He asked, what if Superman was real? And in my account, he did that pretty well. But yet, amidst this complexity, the symbol on Superman's chest, the S, which stands for hope in Kryptonian, this detail introduced in Man of Steel reinforces the idea that Superman is meant to inspire. And lack of this being carried out throughout his stay in the DCEU was actually what caused problems in the first place. Because the problem wasn't the darkness or the realism, it was the lack of release from it. Because Snyder's Superman carried that weight, but he wasn't given enough moments to breathe. We rarely saw Clark Kent be the man, the awkward fanboy, the guy with the dog, his smile. We didn't see the humanity that makes the Superman worth believing in. The emotional beats were there. They were often buried beneath heavy imagery. We felt for him, but we didn't always feel with him. So what exactly was missing? What would have made this Superman perfect? And maybe not create a divide in the Superman fandom between James Gunn's Superman fans and Snyder's? Simple. It is joy. Considering how Snyder wanted Superman to seem, it contradicted what we knew of Superman as and what we expected from a good Superman movie. We needed to see Superman more than just a powerhouse. We needed to see Superman smile, not just in relief but in genuine connection. We needed moments of levity, of community, of life between the battles and burdens. Snyder gave us the struggle of being Superman, but not enough of the wonder or the joy. Imagine one or two more scenes of Clark playing catch with his dad, having a little more gleaming moments of happiness, using his powers not in battle but in kindness, stopping a train, fixing a power outage, helping an old woman carry groceries, not to be praised, but just because it's right. And although it's old-fashioned, at least that's what people think it is that such a bad thing? I said it in my previous video about realism of fantasy in superhero movies that what's expected from a realistic take on a superhero is to see how they react to a world as the characters they represent in the comics, not how they would react if they were us. Despite the direction Snyder was going for, if he included a bit of genuine joy to Superman's character as it is in the comics, not too much that it takes away from the story he's trying to tell, but rather elevate it, that would have made his Superman a bit more appreciated. But I also can't say he didn't plan to, because it's understood that Henry Cavill's Superman is a Superman in growth. He's learning and improving. Yes, that's a very cool concept, but in actuality, that story has been told in far more nuanced ways without relying on explicit realism or changing who the character is to represent that. Having him kill or be too careless in a fight doesn't best represent that inexperience, because that's where all the restraint and advice from Ma and Pa Kent should have come in clutch. That was their role, to teach him restraint and values before he became Superman. And if you don't believe that is the case, then check out shows like Smallville or Superman and Lois. Even the old Christopher Reeve Superman movie did that, and not even to mention the animated series. But instead, the Kents, their guardians in Snyder's films, leaned heavily on caution and fear, which, while understandable, lacked the moral optimism traditionally associated with their characters. But that doesn't also mean that Snyder's Superman was a failure of a Superman film or a Superman in general. No, it wasn't, at least to me, because instead of just being a Superman movie, it also asks a question about what it means to be powerful in a powerless world, about identity, burden, and the cost of doing good when no one agrees on what good is. Snyder's Superman nailed so many aspects of Superman, but because of leaving out the most important things that make Superman a Superman, the Snyderverse Superman was almost perfect. At the end of the day, Henry Cavill's Superman wasn't the one we were used to. He wasn't the smiling icon of the past, but he was the right Superman for a world losing faith. And maybe if we'd given him just a little bit more time, but a little more light, he could have been the Superman everyone appreciated. So that's what I came to yap about today, and you don't always have to agree with my take, so that's what the comment section is for. Let me know what your take is on the Snyderverse Superman. Was he perfect, or was he almost perfect? And if you were able to fix anything about the Snyderverse Superman, what would it be? And while you're down there as well, you could also like this video and subscribe to help grow the channel and so you don't miss any future uploads. Until then, I'm out.